Cool. And we go. Welcome back, everyone, to the 2018 Midseason Showdown here in Brooklyn, New York. I am Dan Levinson. I'm joined by Brendan Lewis. Thank you. And we are going to get underway here for round 4 for today's tournament between Brendan Zhang and Brian Hume.
Yeah, and we're really getting into the thick of the tournament at this point. We've got a handful of players that are starting to kind of separate from the pack a little bit, being 3-0 here in round 3. And we have a matchup between two 3-0 players. And as Dan mentioned, I believe we are going to have a matchup of Brian Hume, who's going to be on the bottom side of your screen, and Brendan Zhang, who is going to be on the top side of your screen. And this is a really exciting matchup, two of younger players as far as Masters go. Brian had a really good season last year. He had kind of established himself as a pretty prominent Buzzwole user in 2017, which was really cool. And of course, I believe cut at least one, maybe two regionals.
Yeah, I know he did the Georgia regional.
Right,
I know it was just one of them, but a very prominent player in the Masters now.
Right, and Brendan Zhang, who aged up to Masters just a couple months ago, I believe, and has already started to make a splash at pretty much every tournament he's been to. I believe he won a PC here, and he was very close to cutting Hartford regionals, and of course, has a bit of a pedigree and is really just a phenomenal player in his own right.
Yeah, I'm expecting really amazing matches from both of these players. Transitioning well into Masters from seniors. Not everyone, not always you'll get these players that transition well, but here we have them both in round 4 now, 3-0. So we'll be seeing a really exciting and amazing matches.
Right, and in particular, I'm a little excited to showcase Brendan's team, which is coming up on your screen here. At the end of 2017, I thought what he had what was one of the really defining, maybe not defining, but different in a good way in the 2017 format. It was very creative, and it wasn't something that anything particularly similar had been run at the time, and he's definitely got something that's in that same vein here, as you see that on the right side of your screen.
As we dive into the teams, we have Brian Hume on the left-hand side with a team of Tapu Koko, Snorlax, Mimikyu, Cresselia, Landorus, and Metagross. And to the right, we have Brendan Zhang with Bronzong, Hitmontop, Azumarill, Salamence, Tapu Koko, and Amoonguss. So both these players really are mostly reusing old teams that were very well these past couple of years. But most notably I'm seeing is the Amoonguss and Azumarill combo, mostly redirecting with the Rage Powder, perhaps setting up with the Belly Drum on the Azumarill, and then taking advantage of that berry. So lots of really common teams Pokemon from them.
Yeah, it was definitely a very common core, especially at the end, like kind of post-Worlds time for 2015, when everybody started to realize that Azumarill could and would take over games. But the thing that jumps out to me from that team is a Bronzong, which was really cool in 2016 and kind of saved the format from total Xerneas domination, but wasn't a factor in 2017, and maybe it wasn't legal. I don't know, but anyway, Bronzong. But it tends to be outclassed by Cresselia, so it's very interesting to see it here. And really, the steel typing is the defining part, and we'll have to see how Brendan fits that piece into his team.
Well, jumping into the match now, we have Brian on the bottom with the Snorlax and Tapu Koko. Tapu Koko activating that electric terrain, and Brendan leading off with that Azumarill and Amoonguss. So perhaps we might get the redirection from Amoonguss, Azumarill setting up, and even the Tapu Koko dishing a great deal of damage thanks to that electric terrain.
Right, and this lead from Brian really has not too much to deal with a Rage Powder plus a Belly Drum. On the flip side, there's not really a whole lot Brendan can do to stop Snorlax from setting up Belly Drums, so we might just see two Belly Drums here, and these two Pokemon at +6 stages of attack are going to duke it out.
Well, there's the Rage Powder from the Amoonguss. Volt Switch onto Amoonguss now, getting redirected, not doing a whole lot of damage, but it takes about 20% here. And Brian is going to have to decide what is going to be the correct choice and switch in. Cresselia now taking its place on the field. And with that, there is the Belly Drum. Azumarill cutting its HP in half, maximizing that attack to +6, and perhaps having the berry. There it is, the Pinch Berry, increasing its HP right back up. It is going to be the Citrus Berry, however, thanks to not having the Gluttony ability. And Snorlax, however, doing its own Belly Drum. There it is, +6 in attack, but thanks to it having the Gluttony ability, will be able to boost its HP back to full health.
Right, and the Gluttony being the key piece there that kind of determines, who we'll say the HP winner of the turn was. So I guess having only recovered 25% will give the slight edge to Snorlax here, but of course Azumarill does get access to something that Snorlax doesn't have, which is priority, and it can Aqua Jet for days.
Well, there is another type of priority.
Oh boy, here we go.
Yeah, here we go. Another priority for Cresselia. It is that Ally Switch, so whatever Azumarill decides to target, Brendan had to have predicted it. We are going to get the knockoff onto the Snorlax, but it already used up that item, and there is the frustration onto Amoonguss +6 attack. We'll be taking that Amoonguss right out.
Right, and knockoff, an interesting reveal from the Azumarill there. What it tends to run, in addition to a belly drum and a protect, would be like a play rough, so that it could have its second stab and a same type attack boosted attack in its second set, in addition to the Aqua Jet. But knockoff is a good option, especially in the face of something like Cresselia, where it can hit it a lot harder, and even on switch-ins, it can knock items off when you're not boosted. So there's a lot more utility, and it can be a more useful type to hit with in certain scenarios. But Snorlax able to take the knockoff pretty well because it's only coming from Azumarill, much weaker attack. It had no item to knock off.
Exactly. And in addition, he could also done a play rough, made of even getting a one-hit KO thanks to that belly drum boost. But it is nice to have knockoff and trying to find out different items of what your opponent is carrying. There is the Salamence, Mega Salamence now with the double edge, it looks like, and is just going to get the knockout on that Snorlax. So I think Brian did take very well use of it and getting the knockout onto Amoonguss. But Ice Beam now from Cresselia ×4 onto Salamence now just barely hanging on there. And another knockoff from Azumarill, super effective, knocking it right out. But maybe we'll be seeing the item on it here. There is the AI Papa Bear, so that is revealed, so that's good information for Brendan this turn.
Yeah, and that right there, that's why you run knockoff. That was a ton of damage coming out, and also able to reveal the item. So a little utility associated with knockoff that Play Rough maybe doesn't have. And the big Mimikyu comes out.
Yeah, Totem Mimikyu now for Brian. You have to collect a whole bunch of stickers for that. But,
yeah, that's a lot of stickers.
Exactly. 80 stickers. But with the Mimikyu now, it does have its abilities, so it can still stall out for one turn and trying to scout what else Brendan is going to try and go for this turn.
Yeah, and Brian's in a bit of a pickle here with the Azumarill still at +6. Hasn't taken a lot of damage, and there's no way Tapu Koko is going to be able to take an Aqua Jet at +6. So Brendan definitely in the driver's seat here, and we'll just have to kind of play correctly around what Brian's trying to do.
Protect onto that Azumarill, Shadow Sneak on that Salamence. So Salamence going down for this turn, and a Thunderbolt from the Tapu Koko, but thanks to that Protect, it's going to be nullified for this turn.
Yeah, so that Shadow Sneak, definitely something that I don't think Brendan saw coming. I think what he was expecting to do there was be able to break the disguise, let Salamence go so that he could get a free switch into what he had in the back, but instead that disguise is going to stay up for another turn. Azumarill using its Protect that turn is going to have to go on the offensive, and Brendan is going to have to be a little bit careful about leaving it open here now because Mimikyu can, of course, go for things like a Will-O-Wisp, which would definitely prevent Azumarill from sweeping, but it's going to get that Aqua Jet right off into the Tapu Koko.
Aqua Jet onto that Tapu Koko, +6, knocking it straight out of here. Dazzling Gleam from the Tapu Koko. Now it is just going to break the disguise on Mimikyu, so it's going to be hanging around another turn. Perhaps Brian just trying to scout any other information he can get right now, but we are going to get the Z move. It is going to be the cuddling, the snuggle forever.
Yep, some more snuggling is going to happen here, but this game is already pretty much over after that Aqua Jet did go off. So really at this point, Brian's giving away information that really wasn't necessary to give away, in my opinion. So sure, he'll take a knockout here. But if he knocks out Azumarill, he's going to get KO'd by the Tapu Koko next turn. And if he knocks out Tapu Koko, he's going to get KO'd by the Azumarill next turn. But it's still a cool animation, so we'll watch Azumarill get uncomfortably snuggled, and then we'll unfortunately probably see it again a couple more times this set, but it's cool. And information that Brendan will definitely have to store away. That's very important to know. You know that the Mimikyu's holding the Z move on the opposing side.
Exactly. I'm expecting a lot of Mimikyu actually for this whole event. We've been seeing mostly just the item itself, Mimikyuum. Is that how that's how you
I think it's Mimikyum or something like
yeah.
that. It's a little tricky to pronounce, but yeah, it's definitely a really important move because I believe it's the highest power fairy move in the game that you can use just from purely base power because it is stronger than anything that you can use with just the fairy MZ.
Well, there is the Gigavolt Havoc from that Tapu Koko targeting the Mimikyu, so Brendan is going to take this game. But finishing off this game, do you think he should have gone for that Z move? Because again, he does still have the electric terrain
Well,
out.
I'll let you know depending on whether or not it lives this, and it doesn't, so no. I think it would have been better information to probably put in his pocket and hold a little bit for later in the game because he has, 3 other things, knowing that the Cresselia doesn't have it that could. He could be a Z Tapu Koko, he could be a Z Landorus, he could be, and of course, a Z Mimikyu, which we know now.
Yeah.
So giving that information away kind of gives you some info that either he's running 2 Z moves, or maybe the Tapu Koko doesn't have it.
Exactly. But so okay, Brendan taking that game one, and now game two.
Hmm.
What kind of adjustments for Brendan? Because we did see how Brian was able to set up. He got a Snorlax +6. Brendan +6.
Hmm.
But in the end, Azumarill is faster than Snorlax, and with the utility for knockoff, finding out the items was a lot more crucial.
Right. I think that the way that Brian has to kind of go about playing around this Azumarill is to utilize Mimikyu's disguise. I think that's kind of the way that he has to think about doing it, is make sure he gets Mimikyu onto the field safely with his disguise up, take whatever attack the Azumarill is going to throw at him that turn, and then hit it with a Let's Snuggle Forever, because, there's not really a lot else that Brian has on its team that can handle the combination of a boosted Aqua Jet plus a knockoff. Even if Metagross comes in, it's probably going to get KO'd by that +6 knockoff. Landorus can't take a +6 or a +5 Aqua Jet, and then Snorlax, of course, we saw how much damage that did with the knockoff, and Cresselia just was, it's gone. There aren't a lot of things that can knock
Yeah.
a Cresselia out, but that +6 knockoff was one of them.
Exactly.
So that this next game here is really going to revolve around how well Brian can deal with the Azumarill.
I really do think, though, that perhaps Brian might want to keep the Snorlax in the back and perhaps try and take out the Azumarill first before he starts to get his set up. Because the problem with dealing with Azumarill, once he gets set up, is it has the knockoff, it has the priority, and that's something that Snorlax does not have.
Right, and despite Azumarill being a pretty slow Pokemon, it is faster than Snorlax, so it will be able to prevent Snorlax, or either do a huge chunk of damage to it, or prevent it from attacking if it's been chipped.
Well, going into game two now, Brendan going his bread and butter. It worked in game one. Why not try it a second time? Azumarill and Amoonguss for him, while Brian is going to stick with that Snorlax and the Tapu Koko. Why do you think he might have stuck with it? Perhaps predicting a switch out or for his leads?
I'm not sure. I don't think Brendan was really given a reason to change his leads. So maybe Brendan or Brian has something different in back that he thinks he can switch into with the Volt Switch. But we're gonna see a Rage Powder, probably 2 Belly Drums, and then Tapu Koko is gonna leave the field. And really, the defining piece of this turn one and how it's gonna play out going forward is what Brian brings in here. That's the adjustment.
Exactly. Well, with the Volt Switch now, if he does bring that Cresselia again, we're just going to be facing the same moves. But instead, he does bring out the Mimikyu now, so perhaps he has something else in mind. Belly Drum now from the Azumarill, cutting that HP in half, activating that Citrus Berry, and I'm going to assume that Snorlax is going to do that same thing like you mentioned.
Right, it's going to Belly Drum here, and then going into turn two, we're in a similar position to game one, if not the exact same position. But I was talking about how getting Mimikyu onto the field would probably be an important thing for dealing with the Azumarill, but not when Amoonguss is on the field, because it can just take that Let's Snuggle Forever probably relatively comfortably.
I mean, I think at this point, maybe Snorlax might, if it's carrying Protect, or I'm not really sure what the Snorlax would do, but at least the Mimikyu might want to try to, like you mentioned, the Let's Snuggle Forever, if it's enough to take out the Amoonguss.
Yeah, I think the more important thing would be whether or not Mimikyu is running Protect, because if Mimikyu can Protect, then Brian can take the turn to use Snorlax, knock out Amoonguss, and then Let's Snuggle Forever the next turn. But there's no Protect here.
Rage Powder from the Amoonguss. There is the knockoff on the Snorlax. Snorlax returning back with their frustration onto that Amoonguss. So Amoonguss getting KO'd right now. What is Mimikyu going to do?
Oh,
it's
and a
going to do
Trick
Trick Room. Okay. That is a bit different
Okay.
because now Snorlax would be faster. However, Azumarill still has access to Aqua Jet.
Right, and it is now in Aqua Jet range, which it wouldn't have been at full health. So, there were a couple things that Brian could have done had he had access to Protect on either of those Pokemon. But I think the way that he played that is definitely pretty indicative of the fact that he does not have Protect on that Snorlax, because I think that would have been a much better play, because he got the Trick Room up for free. But now we're putting Azumarill into a position where it can start taking knockouts.
Well, the good thing is that Mimikyu still hasn't busted its disguise, so it still does have one more turn to try and dish damage here. But Tapu Koko coming out, it's also not great. But instead, Brendan is going to decide to switch it out and bringing in his Salamence. So cutting the attack on both Pokemon. So with that, though, Snorlax is still in a very prominent position here. But Azumarill, with that priority, Aqua Jet onto the Snorlax will be enough to knock it out. And depending on what Mimikyu decides to go over here, it is going to be that Z move, the Let's Snuggle Forever. But if he's able to target that Azumarill, that it will be pretty good for him, because that is the biggest threat.
Definitely be a big play for him. But on the flip side of the turn, I mean, we're only in turn one of Trick Room, but Tapu Koko Salamence is a pretty strong combination, what I'm trying to say, of Pokemon to have left on your field, even in the Trick Room. And now that the Z move is blown, There's not going to be a way, unless Brian has something like a Metagross in the back or like a Stomping Tantrum Metagross or a Salamence to deal with that type of Koko effectively because it'll take just a regular play rough from Mimikyu.
All right, we'll see if
Oh,
that,
it actually
okay,
lives
wow.
it.
Okay, it still took it, but even with the Shadow Stick, I'm still not sure if that's going to be enough, though.
Yeah, because it has been intimidated, so
Yeah.
that's actually a great play by Brendan, knowing that Mimikyu, or I'm sorry, Azumarill was going to be the target of the Z move there, and being that it's a pretty new move. I know a lot of players that aren't super familiar with their calcs on Let's Snuggle Forever because it's very different than just a Twinkle Tackle, but he nailed that one.
But in addition, we have Cresselia coming out now, and we did reveal the ally switch.
Oh, yes.
So is he going to go for it or not? Is he just going to go for another attack and Ice Beam on the Salamence? This is another really critical switch right now.
Right, so Azumarill does have a free knockoff into whichever slot it wants, right, because it is the slowest thing on the field right now. So it's going to get a knockoff off unless it opts to just go for, an Aqua Jet, but it takes the opportunity and just knocks Cress out.
Yep.
So since turn 1 or game 2 of game 1, Brendan has won all of these, the ally switch mind games.
Exactly, a bunch of 50-50s. Play rough onto Azumarill now, getting knocked out, and Salamance's Hyper Voice will be breaking the disguise. So unfortunately, it does get busted, but I think Brian's actually okay. A little bit. I mean, it's not going to be. He still has one more Pokemon left, but not the greatest.
Yeah, so it's a more competitive game than game 1, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think this is really going to come down to what happens when the Trick Room expires. This Mimikyu, I think play rough. Salamence will probably take a play rough at this point. And it could even come down to whether or not the Tapu Kokos are speed tying. If there's one that's slower than the other one and is able to get Dazzling Gleams off quicker than the other one, that could definitely be an impact coming down the stretch here.
That's right. I already forgot Mimikyu is at -1 attack thanks to that Intimidate. But yeah, exactly. You're right. Play rough onto the Salamence. It should be able to take that quite nice. But depending, I mean, I would even go for Dazzling Gleam if they have access to it, too.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll protect onto the Salamence now. Player off onto it. He does target that Tapu Koko, so we'll be taking it at about 40%, and there is the Z move, the Gigavolt Havoc from Tapu Koko, and boosted in that Electric Terrain is going to deal a significant amount. I'm expecting it to deal damage onto the Tapu Koko, you think?
It's a tough call. I think either one of these, I think Brendan really just needs to take a knockout at this point to be able to make his end game more safe, and I think he could probably take it on either Pokemon right now. He's going to go for the Tapu Koko. That does kind of make it so that he's playing, and it does hang on.
Sliver of health there on it. Dazzling Gleam on from that Tapu Koko, dishing that damage right back, and unfortunately not going to get the KO on the Tapu Koko, but Electric Terrain does disappear.
Yeah, and this is definitely getting pretty interesting here. Salamence would likely be able to knock out Mimikyu if it gets the opportunity to use Double Edge, assuming that it's carrying it. I don't think we've seen a Double Edge yet. We've just seen the Hyper Voice. But if it is forced to Hyper Voice, it's not going to be able to knock Mimikyu out.
I think we saw it. It did target the Snorlax earlier. I'm pretty sure that was a Double Edge.
Right. Yeah, in game 1, you're correct.
Yeah. But yeah, depending on what both players do for this turn. Oh, okay, protect on from Brian's side. So we'll be sticking around for another turn here. Player up from the Mimikyu. Oh, it voids it. That was pretty crucial.
Yeah,
and Hyper Voice from the Salamence is going to deal damage onto that Mimikyu. But it's not going to be, about a half there. Not bad. But Tapu Koko going for a Dazzling Gleam now. It should be getting the knockout or barely. Okay. Whoa, even
so
a critical
hit. Wow.
Whoa.
Okay. So the Twisted Dimensions have returned to normal. I think Brian's what he was going for with that Protect is to prevent himself from getting knocked out from the Salamence. And now that he's out of Trick Room, he's given himself the opportunity to at least try and win a speed tie.
Well, there's the Shadow Snake onto the Salamence, but Tapu Koko did that
again.
That might have been the speed tie.
Yeah, it was a speed tie. Yeah. So Brendan had the Tapu Kokos were attacking at the same time on 2 turns. Once in Trick Room, once out of Trick Room, and Brendan got them both.
Wow, that's Pokemon.
That's Pokemon.
But other than that, though, I did like how Brian adjusted from that game 1.
Yeah, it was a good adjustment. Getting the Trick Room up was actually more beneficial than I was expecting it to be, I think, because he had his Z move still available and access to Shadow Sneak within Trick Room. So he was able to put in a little bit more work, despite the fact that it might have been perceived as setting the Trick Room just for the Azumarill. But it was a good adjustment, a good game, too. And he definitely made it close at the end there.
Yep, agree with you more. Yeah, but we will be right back with an interview with Brendan Zhang, so stay tuned. Welcome back, trainers. I am back with the winner of round 4, Brendan Zhang. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So going between those two games, really, really nice. I liked how you led with the Izumiral, and it did, between both players using Belly Drum, you coming out with a victory from that. But Brian did make that adjustment, though. So what can you tell me about those two games?
So normally against teams like that where they kind of set up the Snorlax, I think Azumarill like pretty handily beats Snorlax if you have redirection. So game 1, it was kind of like expected, exactly how I expected. Ally switch not really helping him there. And then in game 2, obviously he brought the Trick Room with the Mimikyu, and I wasn't able to stop that. But I think Trick Room ended up helping me more than he thought it would.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly what we were thinking too, because it did kind of switch the speeds, but in the end, though, having Aqua Jet, it does give you a bit of an advantage.
Right.
So it wasn't really that great, but it still definitely made it a bit more of a battle than that game 1. But other than that, though, was there anything else that you thought about the match? I mean, the Mimikyu, though, did give you a bit of a problem, I guess, would you say?
Yeah, I had to. So yeah, I had to make sure that the Z move, if it did connect on my Azumarill, wouldn't knock it out at 75%.
All right. And
yeah.
do you have anything else?
Yeah, and that's why I first switched in Coco during the Trick Room, and then I switched out into Salamence because I didn't want him to have the potential to Z-move my Salamence there. And so I kind of baited that out onto the Azumarill.
Gotcha. And then I was also going to point out with the ally switch, because like you mentioned, he did try it in both games, but in that game too, I was expecting him to ally switch there, because that would have made a bit of it, because then you would have busted the Mimikyu, and Cresselia would have been able to hang around there, but I guess he was playing more in the mind games in that part.
Yeah. I didn't, I thought, even if he did ally switch, I would get rid of the disguise, and then I would hyper voice, and then he'd be stuck with like a -1 Mimikyu. I don't know. The game probably would definitely would turn out differently. But
all right. Well, I was also going to point out you did just transition into the Masters.
Yeah.
You have pretty much had a lot of success from seniors and going into Masters now. I know you top cut in Hartford. Do you have any advice for players from seniors that are going to Masters that might be on edge about it to still continue playing or anything?
Well, yeah, I got top 16 at Hartford, but just I think this is a really fun game. If you really truly enjoy this game, you're definitely gonna find a lot of fun playing in Masters.
Awesome. Well, congratulations on your win for this round, Brendan, and hopefully we'll see you in Top Cut.
Yep, thanks.
All right, thanks for watching, guys. We will be back with round 5 this next round. Stay tuned.
Here we go. No! 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 He crit the struggle! He crit the struggle!
What is VGC? Very good content. That's what it stands for. And that's exactly what I got going on here. Alright, here we go. We are going to draw Snorlax's face on this pancake. Alright, it looks like Snorlax. What do you guys think? I need some milk. That was very good content.
Hey! Okay, we dealt with the pressing issue. Oh, no we didn't. No we didn't. No we didn't. No we didn't. I thought I was so smart, but then Black Hole Eclipse happened. Bye, Cresselia.
견딜 거야 아마. 머리 띄어도.
Him before. No! No! I was like, nah, no way. Wow. It's fine. Gardevoir can carry. They obviously didn't bring their perish mode.
Come on, Eve, you can do this.